Would anyone willingly pay an extra $6,000 in taxes to the US government? It's a good question, and interestingly enough, I'm actually in that situation right now. I actually chose for 2023, the filing year that we're currently in, to pay an extra $6,000 in taxes. And before I jump into that or tell you why, I want to back up and explain some of the reasoning for what's going on. Why would anyone pay an extra $6,000 of their hard-earned money to the US government? The first thing is when you look at the government spending, they are running a deficit, and every 90 days, that deficit is increasing $1 trillion. This is outpacing anything we've ever seen in the last 50 years or more. And certainly in the last 20 years, we've been running a deficit that is unsustainable. And so certainly concerning. And so maybe you're saying, Gabe, hey, why would you pay them more money? They're clearly outspending what they're making. Are you just trying to subsidize the government? No, of course not. They're demonstrating that they can't manage their finances. So why would I pay them more? Here's why. Currently, there's a couple different ways in terms of taxes to avoid or shelter legally. And in retirement accounts, you can use either tax deferred, which is deferring it now, or paying the taxes now and it growing tax-free. And so there's a couple different options. I want to get into that. But the US government is on pace right now. Their pace is unsustainable. We see the debt continuing to climb month after month. And it begs the question, what's going to happen? So I'm going to show some charts. You should see them here. Essentially, what the biggest payment right now for the US government in terms of expenses, no different than a personal balance sheet, a personal finances when you're looking at your own income expenses. The US government's biggest expense is Social Security. After that, it's Medicare. And just recently, the US government, the third biggest expense is interest. And that's because interest rates, as we all know, have gone up. And so now the debt that the US government has, that interest payment, no different than a credit card interest, that debt has gone up. And so their interest expenses, not paying down the debt, but just the actual interest expense, is the third biggest expense for the US government budget. So this is incredibly troubling. As we think about this, you think there's essentially only two paths to either we go into a state of collapse, which hopefully is not the case. And I guess the other two options are, one, you raise taxes to pay for the ever increasing budget deficit that we have, or you reduce your expenses. And given the fact that the number one expense is Social Security or entitlements, it seems very likely that they would not reduce entitlements or Social Security, because of if any politician undertook that, they would absolutely get voted out of office. And so given the fact that that's number one, Medicare is number two, they're not probably touching those, because again, if you reduce those, all the massive baby boomer generation is going to be saying, hey, there's no way you're touching that. We've invested our hard-earned money into the Social Security program for 20, 30 years, 40 years, and now all of a sudden you're going to cut this. They're not going to happen. And so unfortunately, the government their back is against the wall. And the only option they're going to have is to raise taxes. And I think Biden actually mentioned in a recent speech, hey, raising corporate taxes. They're not going to stop there. They're going to be raising it across the board because they have to cover this massive expense bill that they have. Again, the third biggest expense is the interest that they're paying on the debt, which is ever increasing. So it's this debt snowball, not Dave Ramsey style where it's shrinking, but it's actually blowing up and getting bigger. And so it seems imminent that the US government will continue to raise taxes. Right now, they're relatively low, believe it or not, in terms of, if you look historically over the last 100 years, they've been as high as 70% in some cases. So right now it's relatively low. And so going back to the question of why would anyone pay the US government more money or taxes, here's why. Because again, if you look at your 401k, there's an option oftentimes with your employer. You can certainly do this even personally with your IRAs. So whether that's a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA, you can look at that. And if you pay taxes on a Roth IRA now, pay the taxes now, it essentially grows tax-free and you won't get taxed anymore. And so the benefit is, if you're thinking, hey, the government's going to increase taxes. So if you're going to go from, let's say you're at a 15% tax bracket and they're going to raise it to 23%, maybe next year, maybe in the next couple of years, as they recognize this debt ceiling and bubble is going to explode, then paying 15% is certainly better than paying 23 or 25 or 28 or whatever they end up raising it to. And so that is what I have chosen to do. I've converted about $30,000 of retirement money from a traditional to a Roth in my 401k. And that has created this $6,000 tax bill because I'm paying the taxes now. And that money will now for the next 20, 30 years grow tax-free. And so if the government raises taxes, which seems imminent, then regardless of whatever they do, I'm not going to be fazed by that because my money, I've already paid taxes, I've already paid the taxes now. And so 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever they're doing, however they're spending, my money in retirement is not going to be affected by that. I think this is a super helpful strategy. Again, it's dependent on your own personal situation, but it's something that I've looked at. And again, based on the numbers, based on what the government is currently doing, their spending habits with interest rates the way they are, and forcing them to actually pay more in their interest payments, it seems imminent that taxes will continue to go up. And if you have the option, certainly open up a Roth IRA. That's one way of paying taxes now, and so that money will grow tax-free down the road, and you won't have to worry about the government increasing taxes, and you will have already paid those taxes. Guys, I hope this is helpful, and feel free to like, subscribe, and follow for more. Thanks, guys. Have a great week.